Greetings. Let's talk. When I was a kid, I think one of the really cool moments growing up for me was it was a Saturday morning and I was still in bed, and I remember Mom calling upstairs and she was yelling for me and my brother, and she goes, "Hey, get dressed, your father's going to take you guys out to a movie." And this was a little unusual because normally when Dad was going to a movie, it was a big family thing where we all went. And it was also the fact my sister wasn't going, which kind of went in with my mom not going because Laura was really little and she would have been sitting next to my mom. So, okay, guys movie. Not a typical dad thing to do. It just wasn't who our father was. And we all, and my brother and I and Dad, we all ran out, got in the car. And it turned out he was taking us to see the movie Gettysburg, which was not showing locally. I think we had to drive up to Tyson's Corner to see it. I think it was about 45 minutes, an hour away from the house. And if you haven't seen the movie Gettysburg, I highly recommend it. But one of the things that really made that experience cool for me was Dad had always been interested, always been fascinated with the American Civil War. And that was the first movie I, as a kid, had ever seen that gave me a sense of how the battles were fought, of the physicality, of the logistical considerations, of the personalities involved behind these decisions, the details of warfare in that time period in general, never mind the American Civil War. Understanding that helped me understand a little bit of American history, helped me understand some amazing stories. The Battle of Little Round Top, by the way, is still one of my great battle stories. It's one of the great battles of American history, period. And it helped me understand my father. It really did. It helped me, excuse me, it gave me a little bit of insight into what it was that made him so interested in that part of history. Now, if you fast forward a number of years, I graduated high school, I'll go for leave to go to college, I come out to Oklahoma, and it was September of my first semester in college that I ran into the SCA, and I got into what broadly fits into the reenactor swath of the history movement. And as much as I want to say the rest is history, that's true with me, but a few years later, totally separate from me, my father got into American Civil War reenactment. By then he was long retired, and he was home with his dogs. Dad's life revolved around get up, make breakfast, walk the dog, then go read a book, then go walk the dog for lunch, then go read another book, and then go walk the dog for dinner. That was his life, and still is today. He's a content retiree. And the thing is that really Dad stepping into American Civil War really kind of builds off of that insight I got from him about him when we all went to go see that movie years before. There's a big difference, though, in my father's current situation from mine. And I want to talk about that because a few years ago, I went to go, my whole family went to go visit my folks. And one of the things on that trip was I got to go see one of Dad's reenactments. And it was amazing to see the camps, to talk to the reenactors, just to see the outfits, the shoes, the pants, the shirts, the jackets, the uniforms. To see the battle reenactment. Again, the details, the physicality. These are amazing, amazing details that this reminds me of all of the details that aren't talked about in the history books when they talk about the major battles, the campaigns. When you talk about an army that marched, 100, 200, 300 miles to get to where it was going, You know, reenactments like that help me remember. You're talking about an army that's living out of a tent the size of a refrigerator box and eating food cooked over a campfire. You know, some of these meals didn't have the best vitamins, didn't have the best proteins. You know, you're talking about men who have stomach issues or vitamin deficiencies. You know, sleeping on those cots weren't good on some backs. Sometimes the cots weren't low. You know, take your pick. These details, this is what I take away from camps that I visit like that. I really enjoy the opportunity to experience that part of history. Not 2 years later, I got a call from Mom. And she said, hey, yeah, they just had to cancel your father's reenactment this weekend. Really? Why is that? Someone called in a bomb threat. What? Yeah. And when the bomb squad showed up, they found an active device. And if you think I'm exaggerating or my mother might have been a bit hyperbolic, if you go down the show notes, I'll make sure to link the newspaper article that talks about it. Someone went on site and did in fact have this. They made an IED, and the police were very clear that had it gone off, it would have been devastating to a number of people in that campsite as they were setting up. And I think it was not a day or two later, they found out who it was and they arrested him. Now, this next part is where you and I need to talk, because what happened there really could happen here. The guy who planted that was a reenactor in the local unit. And he went to all of the same practices and meetings and events that my father did. Now, when my father went to these meetings and practices and events, his takeaway was preserving history, talking about the environment these soldiers lived in, showing people the scale, the scope, the range of Civil War combat. You know, very much a traditional living history takeaway. That's my father. That's how my dad does things. He's all about get your hands on it, understand it, do it, show it, teach it. This other guy, I can sum up his motivations. This is per conversations with my father and per several follow-up news articles. That man had been doing American Civil War reenactment for, they said, a couple of years. And his takeaway from all of that was the South will rise again. He was one of those. He was one of those people who was mad the leadership wasn't talking more about the takeaways that he was taking away from these activities. He was mad that the leadership wasn't pushing and talking about and endorsing a more socially and politically conservative worldview. And at some point in there, he felt like it was appropriate, that it was necessary that he use a lethal device to make his point. This man was doing all of the same activities, going to all the same events that my father was. My father's takeaway was, this is cool, let's show people how it was, let's show people what it was like for the soldiers. And this other guy had the exact same set of activities, and his takeaway from this was, let's become a terrorist. And if you think the SCA doesn't flirt with that, Let me tell you another story. Thank God this is much less dramatic. For those of you who know, if you don't know, I do woodworking. It's one of my things. I set up my sawhorse, I set up my workbench, and I'll go do demonstrations. I do it at classes. I do open wood shops here. I used to do guild meetings. I teach at schools, whatever. I remember a demo I was doing. And, you get people interested to come up and talk with you. And I remember someone looking at my workbench, and I'm showing in some really basic joints. And one of the things he casually says in here, after listening to me do my spiel for about 5 minutes, is he picked up one of the boards I've jointed, and he goes, yeah, you don't see woodworking this good in places like Africa or India or China or any of those places. Now, granted, you have to bring some stuff to the conversation already for that to be your takeaway from one of my lectures. Like, I talk about joinery. I talk about wood types. And for some of my longer lectures, I'm very candid about some of the most sophisticated joints we see in traditional woodworking really do come out of Japan and China. And some of the probably the most durable joinery we see, not necessarily the prettiest, the durable joinery we see, does come out of central China. But I'm very careful about giving proper national attributions to where certain tools or joints or techniques come from. And I certainly promote what I favor, but I also tell people, look, some of this is personal opinion. There's some excellent woodworkers from all of these corners of the globe. You certainly have to bring some outside information in for that to be your takeaway for one of my lectures. But at the exact same time, nowhere in my lectures am I expressly saying the words, all of these different joints or all of these different techniques come from different environments. So comparing them is difficult. Comparing Japanese woodworking to European woodworking, just saying which has better joints, this excludes the fact that the woodworkers of Japan grew up in an entirely different environment than the woodworkers of Europe. And granted, Europe has a lot of environments. I'm not trying to oversimplify that, but Japan was dealing with things like typhoons and seismic activity that Europe wasn't. So from a cultural level, their carpenters from day one had to deal with the fact that you could legitimately on an annual basis have a wind that would blow the whole house over. You don't see that in Europe, and that's reflected in how they approach carpentry and how they approach joinery. Comparing Japanese carpentry and comparing European carpentry, there are fair ways of doing that, but simply blithely saying one is better than the other neglects so much history and so much context that it's frankly dishonest. Excuse me. When we teach something in the SCA, I think the thesis statement I want to take away from this, the thing that I want us all to hang on to, when my father's unit was doing American Civil War reenactment, there was no curriculum, there was no list of bullet points, there was no guidance for what does someone take away from this. And now granted, a bullet point of what you should take away from this is very much a two-edged sword, because we all take away something different from our classes, and we all learn something different. That's part of what makes the living history environment so wonderful. But in their case, that openness was open enough that it let someone like that come in and continue to, frankly, fester. Now, we in the SCA, part of our culture is to teach classes that have, especially our history classes, but also our arts and science classes, a very open curriculum, a very much a take away from this what you want, use this as you want. My challenge to you is that we need to start trying to close the doors on the wings of that openness just a little bit, so that we draw a very hard line, so that we don't get a white nationalist or a Christian nationalist, or pick your bigotry, pick your fake history. We don't unwittingly, accidentally give one of them an unexpected place to thrive or an unexpected boost to their skewed worldview. I'm going to make sure that when I teach my medallion making classes, because the medallion making I teach is very distinctly European. It is absolutely unique to Europe. Its inventor started in Europe. The way it is done is uniquely European, and all other artisans who practice that style trace their techniques back to this master in Europe. But there are other equally vibrant, beautiful methods of making medallions from other parts of the world. And I'm going to start making sure that I include that, so that when I teach my next class, I don't even leave the door open to suggest that Europe had the best medallions. No. Europe was home to one very cool way of making medallions, and that's, I teach that method. But there are also really cool ways of making medallions in Asia, in India, and China and India and Japan, and Mediterranean Africa. A lot of different cultures had really cool ways of making these things. I just happen to teach one. But there's a difference between teaching just how I make one and teaching how I make one and including, and these are all of the other countries that do it totally differently, so you can see all of the beautiful examples out there. And maybe you can go out and research one of those and learn how to do those if you like. That's really important. It's really important that we make sure that one of the bullet points we do include with our classes is an open, inviting, inclusive worldview. Because that's how my father's unit could have prevented a bomb threat with a live IED involved. Fortunately, and thank God, no one was injured in that event. But an argument can be made for dumb luck there. I know this is heavy. I know this is not something that most of us like talking about, but I want to have that conversation. I wanted to share those thoughts with you, and I want to challenge you, especially some of the more serious players, some of the more senior players, to factor that into your teachings. Whether you're teaching an arts and sciences class or history class, or even if you're on the martial arts field, whether you're teaching archery, sword fighting, rapier fighting, side sword, cut and thrust. Let's make sure we have a bit of a curriculum, not to limit what people learn, but to make sure someone doesn't bring the abhorrence of exclusionism and bigotry into your class simply because we didn't think to make sure to exclude it at the door. So, like I said, it's a lot to chew on. It's real heavy. Part of me, sorry, I'm dumping this on you. The other part of me feels this is very important. So, thank you very much for listening to this. I'll see you at the next event. Until then, goodbye, and God bless. If there are two things I've learned that drive videos these days, it's controversy and engagement. Now, I am never going to fly the controversy flag on a regular basis. It's not what I'm here for. It's not the content I want to make, and I really don't think it helps any of us. But let's do engagement. If you like this video, please go down in the comments and leave a comment. Make sure to share the video. And last but not least, easiest of all, make sure to like the video. That helps drive the algorithm. It helps get the video views and helps promote this material. Thank you very much.